Dr. Amanda Clark pressed her face against the cold metal of the observation window and watched the blue-green planet grow bigger in front of her eyes. The medical ship UNHS Sanctuary moved slowly through space toward Kepler 442b like a white whale swimming through an ocean of stars. She had been traveling for 3 months to reach this place, and her heart felt heavy with what she knew waited for them on the surface. The planet looked peaceful from space, but Amanda knew better. Down there, human settlers were dying in a war. That was not their own. 2 alien races called the Vorthic Empire and the Zephyrian Collective had been fighting over this world for 6 months. The humans who lived there were caught in the middle like children, trapped between 2 angry giants. Every day brought reports of more deaths and more wounded people who needed help. Captain Ryan Mitchell walked into the observation deck and stood beside her. His uniform was clean and pressed, but his eyes showed the same worry that Amanda felt. He had been commanding hospital ships for 15 years and had never lost a single patient during transport. The sanctuary was his pride, and the crew trusted him completely. "How many wounded are we expecting to treat?" Amanda asked without looking away from the planet. "The latest reports say over 2,000 civilians need immediate medical care," Ryan replied. "Many more will need surgery or long-term treatment. Some of the injuries are unlike anything our doctors have seen before." Amanda nodded and thought about her medical team. Dr. Lisa Martinez was the best trauma surgeon in human space and had volunteered for this mission despite having 3 young children at home. Nurse Jennifer Walsh had served on 5 different hospital ships and could work for days without sleep when lives were at stake. The entire medical staff of 400 people had given up comfortable positions on Earth to come here and save strangers. The sanctuary was not like other ships. It carried no weapons and had no shields except for basic protection against space debris. The hull was painted bright white with large red crosses that could be seen from millions of miles away. Every alien species in the galaxy knew what those symbols meant. The ship transmitted medical identification codes on all frequencies, so no one could mistake its purpose. Lieutenant Commander Jake Phillips sat at his communication station on the bridge and sent the same message over and over again to both alien fleets. "This is the United Nations Hospital Ship Sanctuary. We are here on a humanitarian mission to treat wounded civilians. We carry no weapons and pose no threat to anyone. Please acknowledge our medical status and allow us safe passage." The Vorthic were reptilian creatures who stood 8 feet tall and valued honor above everything else. Their ships looked like metal dragons with sharp edges and gleaming armor. They had been fighting the Zephyrians for over a century, but usually respected medical neutrality. Their commander, Admiral Corvith, had sent a brief message acknowledging the sanctuary's presence 3 days ago. The Zephyrians were different and harder to understand. They looked like giant insects with 4 arms and compound eyes that saw in ways humans could not imagine. They worked together like a hive mind and made decisions as a group rather than having individual leaders. Their ships were round and smooth like eggs floating in space. They had also acknowledged the hospital ship, but their message was strange and full of words that did not translate well. "Both fleets are keeping their distance," Jake reported to Captain Mitchell. "The Vorthic ships are holding position near the northern continent where most of their ground forces are located. The Zephyrian fleet is spread out around the southern hemisphere. There is a clear corridor between them that leads directly to the main human settlement." Ryan studied the tactical display and felt relieved. The aliens were staying away from each other and leaving space for the medical ship to work. This was exactly what he had hoped for when he planned the mission route. Dr. Amanda Clark made her way down to the main medical bay, where her staff was preparing for the first wave of patients. The sanctuary had been designed specifically for treating large numbers of wounded people quickly. It had 50 operating rooms, 200 recovery beds, and medical equipment that was more advanced than most planetary hospitals. Everyone listen. Amanda called out to her team. We are going to see injuries and conditions that are not in any medical textbook. Both alien armies use weapons that cause damage in ways we have never dealt with before. Some patients may have been exposed to alien chemicals or energy fields that could affect them in unexpected ways. Dr. Martinez looked up from the surgical equipment she was checking. What about contamination protocols? She asked. If these people have been exposed to alien biological agents, we need to protect ourselves in the ship. We have isolation wards. Prepared on Deck 7, Amanda replied. Any patient showing signs of unknown illness or contamination will be treated there first. But remember, we are here to save lives, not to worry about our own safety. These people have been suffering for months while we traveled here. The first shuttle launched from the planet's surface 6 hours after the sanctuary arrived in orbit. It carried 12 critically wounded humans who had been hurt in the latest battle between the two alien armies. Most of them were unconscious and covered in bandages that were already soaked with blood. Amanda worked on a young woman who had severe burns across her back and arms. The wounds were unlike anything she had seen before, with edges that seemed to shimmer and change color in the light. Whatever weapon had caused this injury was designed to keep hurting long after the initial damage was done. Her cellular structure is breaking down at the molecular level, Dr. Martinez said as she studied the medical scanner readings. This is not just a burn. Something is actively destroying her tissue and spreading through her body. Can we stop it? Amanda asked while she cleaned the wounds as carefully as possible. I think so, but it will take time, and we need to understand what caused it first. We may need to synthesize a completely new type of medicine to counteract whatever alien weapon did this to her. Over the next 2 days, shuttles came and went, constantly bringing more wounded people up to the hospital ship. The medical staff worked without rest as they treated injuries that challenged everything they knew about human biology. Some patients had been exposed to vorthic plasma weapons that continued burning inside their bodies. Others showed signs of Zephyrian nerve toxins that attacked the brain and nervous system. Despite the strange and difficult nature of their injuries, every patient who came aboard the sanctuary received the best medical care that human science could provide. Dr. Amanda Clark and her team saved lives that would have been lost without their intervention. The hospital ship became a beacon of hope for the human settlers who had been abandoned by the rest of the galaxy. Captain Ryan Mitchell watched his crew work with pride and knew they were doing something important. The sanctuary represented the best of humanity. In a galaxy full of violence and war, they had come here to heal and to help. No one could question their motives or doubt their commitment to saving innocent lives. Dr. Amanda Clark was deep in surgery when the first alarm sounded. She had been working on a young boy who could not have been more than 10 years old, and his injuries were the worst she had seen in 3 days of treating wounded civilians. A vorthic plasma blast had torn through his chest, and the alien weapon was still burning inside his body like a slow fire. Her hands moved carefully as she used a laser scalpel to remove the infected tissue while Dr. Martinez monitored his vital signs. His heart rate is dropping, Lisa said in a worried voice. The plasma damage has spread to his cardiovascular system. We need to replace the damaged vessels or he will not survive. Amanda nodded and continued working even as the ship's warning lights began flashing red. The boy's parents had died in the same attack that hurt him, and she was his only hope of survival. She could not stop now, no matter what was happening outside the operating room. That Lieutenant Commander Jake Phillips burst through the medical bay doors with panic written across his face. His communication headset was crackling with urgent messages. From the bridge, and his hands shook as he spoke into his microphone. Captain Mitchell to all stations, came the announcement over the ship's intercom system. We have multiple contacts approaching our position at high speed. Both Vorthic and Zephyrian fleets are converging on our location. All medical staff, prepare for possible emergency evacuation. Dr. Amanda Clark looked up from her patient 4. Just a moment. How many ships? She asked Jake without stopping her work on the boy's damaged heart. 12 Vorthic destroyers from the north and 8 Zephyrian battle cruisers from the south, Jake replied. They are not responding to our communications, and they are moving in attack formation. The hospital ship had no weapons and no real defenses, except for the medical symbols painted on its hull and the international laws that protected hospital ships from attack. Every civilized species in the galaxy had signed the Galactic Medical Accord, which made attacking medical vessels a war crime punishable by the most severe penalties. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge and watched the tactical displays. The alien ships grew closer. His crew of navigation officers and engineers looked to him for orders, but there was nothing he could do. The sanctuary could not run fast enough to escape military vessels, and it had no way to fight back against. Warships. Open a channel to both fleets, Ryan ordered Jake. Broadcast on all frequencies, and make sure they understand who we are. Jake's voice echoed through space as he sent the same message over and over again. This is the United Nations Hospital. Ship Sanctuary. We are protected under the Galactic Medical Accord. We carry wounded civilians and medical personnel only. We have no weapons and pose no threat to your operations. Please acknowledge our protected status and maintain safe distance. Dr. Martinez ran through the medical bays, telling everyone to prepare the escape pods and evacuation shuttles. The most critically wounded patients could not be moved, but the staff began loading those who could survive transport into the small emergency craft. There were not enough pods for everyone, and many would have to stay behind with the patients who were too hurt to move. I am not leaving, Amanda said when Lisa told her to get ready for evacuation. This boy will die if I stop operating now. There are 15 other patients in critical condition who cannot be moved. Someone has to stay with them. The ship could be destroyed, Lisa replied. You cannot help anyone if you are dead. These people trusted us to take care of them, Amanda answered. I will not abandon them now just to save myself. Down in the lower decks, Nurse Jennifer Walsh was helping to carry patients to the escape pods when the ship suddenly shook with a tremendous impact. The lights flickered and went out for several seconds before the emergency power came online. The artificial gravity failed briefly, and everyone floated in the air before crashing back down as the systems restarted. Hull breach on Deck 4, came an announcement from the bridge. All personnel evacuate sections 12 through 18. Immediately. The alien fleets had opened fire without warning. Both the Vorthic and Zephyrian ships were shooting at the defenseless hospital ship with their military weapons. Plasma bolts and energy beams tore through the sanctuary's thin hull like it was made of paper. The white metal plates with their bright red medical crosses were scorched and melted by the alien weapons. Amanda felt the operating table shake beneath her hands as another explosion rocked the ship. The boy's heart monitor showed dangerous fluctuations as she knew she was running out of time. She worked faster than she had ever worked before trying to save his life, even as the ship died around them. Decompression alert in Medical Bay 7. Came another announcement. Sealing emergency bulkheads. All staff in that section report to safe areas immediately. Dr. Martinez grabbed Amanda's arm and tried to pull her away from the operating table. We have to go now, she shouted over the sound of alarms and explosions. The whole section is losing atmosphere. 2 more minutes, Amanda replied. I can. Save him if you give me 2 more minutes. But they did not have 2 more minutes. A massive explosion somewhere near the ship's reactor sent a shockwave through every deck and corridor. The operating room's viewport cracked and then shattered, completely as the atmosphere rushed out into space. Amanda watched in horror as the young boy and everything else in the room was sucked into the vacuum of space through the broken window. The emergency bulkheads slammed shut and sealed off the damaged section, but it was too late. Dozens of patients and medical staff had been lost when the hull was breached. Amanda found herself floating in a corridor that was rapidly losing air pressure. As she struggled to reach an escape pod dot, she made it to the pod bay, where Captain Mitchell and a handful of survivors were crowding into the last functional escape craft. The hospital ship was breaking apart around them as both alien fleets continued their attack. Pieces of white metal with medical symbols drifted past the viewport like the scattered remains of a broken dream. "Why?" Amanda whispered as she strapped herself into the escape pod. "Why would they attack a hospital ship? We were only trying to help people." Captain Mitchell had no answer as he launched the pod away from the dying sanctuary. They watched through the small window as the ship that had been their home and workplace was torn apart by alien weapons. The Vorthic and Zephyrian fleets fired until nothing remained but twisted metal and glowing debris floating in the darkness of space. Out of the 847 people who had been aboard the hospital ship, only 23 survived in the single escape pod that managed to get away from the destruction. The escape pod drifted through space for 6 days before the rescue ships found them. Dr. Amanda Clark sat in the cramped metal container with 22 other survivors and watched the stars through the small window. None of them spoke much during those long days because there was nothing to say that could make sense of what had happened to them. Captain Ryan Mitchell used the pod's emergency radio to send distress signals every hour, but space was vast and empty. The nearest human outpost was 3 solar systems away, and it would take time for help to arrive. They had enough food and water for 2 weeks, but the air recycling system was damaged and working poorly. Some of the survivors had injuries that needed medical attention, but there were no supplies in the pod to treat them. When the rescue ships finally appeared on their scanners, Amanda felt relief mixed with a deep sadness that would never leave her. The destroyer UEC Falcon and 2 smaller patrol boats had been searching for them since receiving their first distress call. The ships moved carefully through the debris field that had once been the hospital ship's sanctuary, looking for any other survivors. Commander Ben Taylor came aboard the rescue ship personally to speak with the survivors. He was a career military officer who had fought in 3 different wars, but his hands shook when he saw the condition of the people who had escaped from the hospital ship. Amanda's medical uniform was torn and stained with blood from patients she had tried to save. Captain Mitchell's face showed the hollow look of a man who had lost everything he cared about. "What happened out there?" Commander Taylor asked in a quiet voice. "The debris field suggests your ship was completely destroyed, but we found no evidence of weapons fire from your vessel." Dr. Amanda Clark looked at him with tired eyes that had seen too much death. "They opened fire without warning," she said. "Both fleets attacked us at the same time. We were clearly marked as a medical ship, and we had been broadcasting our humanitarian status for days. They knew exactly what we were, and they destroyed us anyway." "That is impossible," Commander Taylor replied. "No civilized species attacks hospital ships. It violates every law of war that exists. There must have been some kind of mistake or misunderstanding." Captain Mitchell shook his head slowly. "There was no mistake. We followed every protocol and broadcast on all frequencies. The Vorthic and Zephyrian fleets deliberately targeted a defenseless medical vessel and murdered everyone aboard. They killed doctors and nurses who were trying to save lives. They killed wounded civilians who could not even defend themselves. The commander recorded everything the survivors told him and transmitted their statements directly to Earth through the military's quantum communication network. The news reached Earth Command within hours and spread through every human colony, an outpost in known space. People who heard the story could not believe that such a thing was possible in the modern galaxy. Admiral George Watson was in his office at Earth Command headquarters when the message arrived. He had been reviewing supply reports for the frontier colonies, but stopped everything when he saw the priority level of the incoming transmission. The Admiral was 60 years old and had spent his entire career trying to maintain peace between humans and alien species. But what he read in that report changed him forever. The recording from Dr. Amanda Clark played on his wall screen, and Admiral Watson watched every second of it without moving. When it ended, he sat in silence for several minutes before calling an emergency meeting of the entire military council. Every senior officer in the human military received orders to report to Earth Command immediately, regardless of where they were or what they were doing. Admiral Kate Morrison arrived first, having commanded the 5th Fleet from a base only 2 systems away from Earth. She was known throughout the military as a brilliant tactician who had never lost a battle, but she was also famous for her compassion toward civilian populations. When she heard about the hospital ship attack, her face turned red with anger. "They crossed a line that should never be crossed," she said to Admiral Watson. "Medical personnel are sacred. They help everyone regardless of species or politics. Attacking them is like attacking the foundation of civilized society itself." General Paul Henderson came next. He commanded all human ground forces and had fought against both Vorthic and Zephyrian armies in previous conflicts. Unlike the Navy officers, he understood alien psychology and military thinking better than most humans. His analysis of the attack was even more disturbing than the basic facts. This was not a mistake or an accident, he told the assembled commanders. Both alien fleets coordinated their attack, which means they planned it in advance. They decided together to destroy a hospital ship as a way of sending a message to humanity. They want us to know that they do not respect our laws or our values. Double quotes. Dr. Nathan Hill was the only civilian in the meeting. He served as Earth's chief advisor on alien species and had spent 20 years studying Vorthic and Zephyrian cultures. His expertise was needed to understand why the attack had happened and what it meant for human relations with both species. The Vorthic value honor above everything else, he explained to the military leaders. Attacking a hospital ship goes against their most basic beliefs about warfare. For them to do this means they no longer see humans as worthy of honorable treatment. They view us as animals or insects that do not deserve the protection of civilized law. "What about the Zephyrians?" Admiral Watson asked. "Even worse," Dr. Hill replied. "The hive mind makes decisions based on long-term survival of their species. If they attack the hospital ship, it means they have decided that humanity represents a threat that must be eliminated completely. They are not interested in honor or mercy. They only care about winning." The meeting continued for 18 hours as the military leaders planned their response to the attack. Supply officers calculated how many ships and troops could be mobilized. Intelligence specialists analyzed both alien military capabilities and weaknesses. Strategic planners worked out attack routes and target priorities. Admiral Watson made the final decision just before dawn. "We will mobilize every ship in the human fleet," he announced. "Every destroyer, every cruiser, every carrier, and every support vessel will be assembled for a single mission. We are going to show these aliens what happens when they attack our healers." The authorization codes went out within minutes to every human military installation in the galaxy. Operation Dark Star began immediately as ships left their stations and began moving toward assembly points near Earth. The largest military force in human history was about to be unleashed on the species that had dared to attack a hospital ship. The human fleet that assembled at the edge of the Kepler system was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Admiral George Watson stood on the bridge of the massive flagship UES Retribution and looked out at an ocean of metal that stretched beyond the horizon in every direction. 200 heavy cruisers formed the backbone of the formation, while 400 destroyers created a protective screen around the larger vessels. 150 assault carriers held thousands of fighter craft ready to launch at a moment's notice. Captain Eric Stone sat in the cockpit of his fighter and watched the capital ships through his canopy. He had been flying combat missions for 8 years, but had never seen so many human vessels in one place. The combined fleet created its own gravity field that pulled asteroids and space debris toward it like a magnet. When all the ships activated their engines at the same time, the light could be seen from 3 solar systems away. The journey from Earth had taken 3 weeks, and during that time the fleet's scientists had been working around the clock to develop new weapons specifically designed to fight Vorthic and Zephyrian forces. Dr. Rebecca Davis led a team of researchers who had studied every piece of alien technology that humans had ever captured or analyzed. They knew the weaknesses of both enemy species and had created weapons to exploit those weaknesses. The Vorthic ships rely on thick armor plating to protect them from conventional weapons, Dr. Davis explained to Admiral Watson and his staff officers. But our quantum torpedoes can phase through solid matter and explode inside their hulls. Their armor becomes useless against weapons that ignore physical barriers completely. Admiral Kate Morrison listened carefully to the technical briefing. She would be commanding the heavy cruisers during the battle and needed to understand how the new weapons worked. "What about the Zephyrian vessels?" she asked. "Their ships are completely different from anything the Vorthic use. The Zephyrians depend on their hive mind communication system to coordinate their fleet movements," Dr. Davis replied. "Our electromagnetic pulse cannons can disrupt their neural links and leave their ships unable to work together. Once they lose their collective consciousness, they become easy targets for our conventional weapons." The fleet's intelligence officers had been monitoring alien communications for weeks and reported that both enemy fleets were still in orbit around Kepler 442b. The Vorthic and Zephyrian forces appeared to be unaware that humanity was preparing to attack them. They continued their war on the planet's surface and treated the human colonists as obstacles to be removed rather than people with rights. Commander Helen Foster had volunteered to lead the first wave of the assault. She commanded a squadron of fast attack ships that would strike the enemy formations before the main fleet arrived. Her crews had trained specifically for this mission, and every pilot knew that they were fighting to avenge the murder of innocent medical personnel. "Remember what we are here for," she told her squadron leaders over the communication network. "They attacked our hospital ship and killed our doctors and nurses. They murdered wounded civilians who could not defend themselves. Today we show them that humanity protects those who heal others." The alien fleets became visible on long-range scanners when the human force was still 2 hours away from the planet. 12 Vorthic destroyers held position near the northern continent, where their ground forces were fighting human colonists. 8 Zephyrian battlecruisers patrolled the southern hemisphere and occasionally fired on civilian targets, just to terrorize the population. Admiral Watson activated the fleet's communication system and sent a message to both alien commanders. His voice was calm and steady, but everyone who heard it understood the fury that lay beneath his controlled words. "This is Admiral George Watson of the United Earth Defense Force," he said. 3 weeks ago, your fleets attacked and destroyed the hospital ship UNHS Sanctuary. You murdered 824 medical personnel and wounded civilians who were protected under the Galactic Medical Accord. You have violated every law of civilized warfare and committed crimes against the most basic principles of decency. The message continued as the human fleet moved closer to the planet. We are here to deliver justice for that attack. You have one opportunity to surrender your forces and submit to trial for war crimes. If you refuse, we will destroy every ship in both of your fleets and hunt down everyone responsible for the hospital ship massacre. The Vorthik response came first. Admiral Corvett's deep reptilian voice crackled over the communication channels, with what sounded like laughter. Humans are weak creatures who waste resources on healing the wounded instead of making more warriors. Your hospital ship was a symbol of your weakness, and we destroyed it to teach you a lesson about strength. The Zephyrian reply was stranger and harder to understand because it came from their collective consciousness rather than an individual leader. The Hive has determined that human expansion threatens our species' survival. All human vessels and installations must be eliminated to preserve Zephyrian dominance in this sector. Your healing ships were legitimate targets because they helped humans reproduce and spread. Admiral Watson closed the communication channel and turned to his tactical officers. Both alien fleets have rejected our demand for surrender and admitted to deliberately attacking a medical vessel, he said in a voice that carried throughout the bridge. All ships prepare for combat operations, weapons free. Show them what happens when they murder our healers. The battle began when Commander Foster's fast attack squadron launched their first strike against the Vorthik destroyers. Her ships moved like deadly shadows through space and fired their quantum torpedoes before the enemy could react. The alien vessel's thick armor plates provided no protection as the human. Weapons phased through solid matter and exploded inside their hulls. Captain Stone launched with his fighter squadron just as the main fleet engaged both alien forces. Space around Kepler 442b filled with weapons fire and explosions as human ships systematically destroyed their enemies. The Vorthik tried to fight with honor according to their warrior traditions, but found themselves facing opponents who fought with cold scientific precision. The Zephyrian battlecruisers attempted to coordinate their defense using their hive mind communication system, but Dr. Davis's electromagnetic pulse cannons disrupted their neural links and left them confused and isolated. Individual alien ships tried to escape, but found themselves surrounded by human vessels that had been specifically designed to hunt them down. Admiral Morrison's heavy cruisers concentrated their firepower on the largest enemy vessels, while the destroyers dealt with smaller targets. The human fleet worked together like a perfect machine, with every ship knowing exactly what it was supposed to do and when to do it. The battle lasted 18 hours, and when it ended, both alien fleets had been completely destroyed. Admiral George Watson watched from the bridge of the U.E.'s Retribution as the last Zephyrian battlecruiser exploded in a ball of fire and twisted metal. Not a single enemy ship had escaped from the Kepler system, and the space around the planet looked like a graveyard filled with the burning wreckage of vessels that had dared to attack a human hospital ship. Captain Eric Stone flew his fighter through the debris field and marveled at the completeness of their victory. Pieces of Vorthik destroyers drifted past his cockpit like broken toys, while the remains of Zephyrian cruisers spun slowly through the void. The human fleet had fought with a precision and fury that terrified even their own pilots. Every shot had found its target, and every attack had been perfectly coordinated. Dr. Rebecca Davis monitored the battle from the science station and recorded data on how well their new weapons had performed. The quantum torpedoes had penetrated Vorthik armor as easily as she had predicted, while the electromagnetic pulse cannons had completely disrupted Zephyrian hive mind communications. Both alien species had discovered too late that humanity's scientists could create weapons specifically designed to counter any defensive system. But Admiral Watson knew that destroying these two fleets was only the beginning of what needed to be done. The aliens who had ordered the attack on the hospital ship were still alive, and their governments needed to understand that such crimes would never be tolerated. He divided his massive fleet into smaller task forces and sent them to hunt down every Vorthic and Zephyrian installation within 50 light-years of human space. Admiral Kate Morrison led her heavy cruisers to the Vorthic home system, where their military headquarters controlled operations throughout this part of the galaxy. The reptilian warriors had built their bases on asteroids and moons that they thought were too well defended for any enemy to attack. They learned differently when human quantum torpedoes began exploding inside their supposedly impregnable fortresses. Commander Helen Foster took her fast attack ships to destroy Zephyrian shipyards and supply depots. The insectoid aliens had constructed their facilities in hidden locations that were difficult to find, but human intelligence networks had been tracking them for years. One by one, the secret bases vanished under concentrated firepower from vessels that appeared without warning and disappeared just as quickly. The alien governments tried to negotiate, but Admiral Watson refused to speak with them until they surrendered unconditionally. Human forces occupied every military installation. They captured and established their own bases in territory that had belonged to their enemies for centuries. The speed and efficiency of the conquest shocked every other species in the galaxy, who had thought the Vorthic and Zephyrian empires were too powerful to defeat. Dr. Amanda Clark had recovered from her injuries and rejoined the fleet as its chief medical officer. She established field hospitals on every world that human forces liberated and made sure that wounded aliens received the same quality care that had been denied to human patients aboard the sanctuary. Her medical teams treated Vorthic and Zephyrian soldiers with the same dedication they had shown to human civilians. "Why are you helping our wounded?" asked a captured Vorthic officer who was recovering from severe burns in one of Amanda's hospitals. "We destroyed your medical ship and killed your people. You should let us die as we deserve." Amanda looked at him with the same compassion she had shown to every patient throughout her career. "Because that is what healers do," she replied. "We save lives regardless of who needs saving. The fact that your people do not understand, this is exactly why they had to be stopped." The war crimes trials began 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, when both alien governments finally agreed to surrender. The Vorthic Admiral Corvith and the Zephyrian Collective Council faced charges for ordering the deliberate attack on a protected medical vessel. The evidence against them was overwhelming and included their own recorded communications, admitting that they had targeted the hospital ship intentionally. Captain Ryan Mitchell testified at the trials and described how his ship had followed every protocol for medical neutrality. Lieutenant Commander Jake Phillips played recordings of the messages they had sent to both alien fleets, identifying themselves as a humanitarian mission. Dr. Amanda Clark spoke about the patients who had died when the ship was destroyed, and the medical staff who had given their lives trying to save others. The alien leaders were found guilty of war crimes and sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote human colony world. Both the Vorthic Empire and Zephyrian Collective were required to pay massive reparations to the families of everyone who had died aboard the sanctuary. More importantly, they were forced to sign new treaties that gave human forces the right to inspect their military operations and ensure they never again attacked medical personnel. The galaxy learned a lesson that day about what happened when humanity's protectors were threatened. Species that had never heard of humans before suddenly knew their name and understood that they were not to be taken lightly. The destruction of 2 major alien powers in less than a year sent a message that spread throughout known space like wildfire. Admiral Watson established the Sanctuary Protocol in memory of the destroyed hospital ship. Any attack on human medical personnel would trigger an immediate and overwhelming military response regardless of where it happened or which species was responsible. The protocol was posted in every alien embassy and translated into hundreds of different languages, so no one could claim They did not understand it. Dr. Amanda Clark was promoted to surgeon, General of the United Earth Defense Force, and given authority over all military medical operations. She made sure that every human ship carried enough medical supplies to treat both friendly and enemy wounded. The white hulls with red crosses became a symbol of hope throughout the galaxy as people learned that humans would heal anyone who needed help. The original UNHS Sanctuary was never rebuilt, but its name lived on in memory and in the fear it inspired. In humanity's enemies, no alien species ever again dared to attack a human medical vessel because they all knew what had happened to the last ones who tried. The stars themselves seemed darker after witnessing what humans would do to protect their healers, and the lesson was never forgotten by anyone who had seen the wreckage floating in space. AROUND Kepler-442b. Years later, when Admiral Watson was asked why the human response had been so overwhelming, he gave an answer that became famous throughout known space. They thought attacking our hospital ship would make us afraid to help others. Instead, they taught the galaxy why humans fight hardest when defending those who save lives.